And welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. And, this topic, I think, is taking on a life of its own. And so I'm gonna continue with this for a while. There's a bunch of different possible solutions. The topic I'm talking about, of course, is this police officer who was just acquitted in the killing of Freddie Gray. And I'm calling it a killing. And although I'm not sure that he was specifically charged with murder, but in fact, I had the paper. And what do we do about this? How do we deal with this reality? I don't know if you've ever been in uniform, but even pretend. I mean, even dress up, right? Parades, parties, whatever. There is something about a uniform, and particularly about the presence of a gun, that changes the fundamental psychology of the people wearing them and carrying them. It's a subtle change in most cases, but it's real. It's a change. And we have, as we've been systematically defunding our schools, our education spending is down about 20% over 2 decades ago in our public schools, as we're defunding our colleges. Before Reagan came into office, about 80% of the cost of colleges was paid for by government agencies, and 20% was paid for by tuition. Now tuition covers 80%, and government covers 20%, which is why, 40 years or 35 years ago, you could go to college and not be broke when you left. In fact, you could put yourself through college with a summer job. My wife put herself through college as a waitress at Howard Johnson's. I put myself through college. Again, neither one of us graduated, but to the extent that I went to college, 2 of them, it was working as a DJ, and my recollection is I was making $2.35 an hour, and that was weekend work at that time, and working at Bob's Big Boy as a dishwasher. And working at the Exxon station across the street from Bob's Big Boy. I literally had both those jobs, but would go from one to the other on weekends. But I worked weekends, and sometimes an afternoon here and there. But when I didn't have classes, but you could pay for college that way. And I never had any student debt. Louise never had any student debt. It was unheard of, unless you were going for a graduate degree. So. We have been systematically defunding the American government, our public functions. We've been systematically defunding them, operating on the Reaganistic idea that American government is evil. That American government is a terrible thing. The Republicans will tell you, and you're going to hear it from Donald Trump, and you're going to hear it from, Paul Ryan recites this on a regular basis. Not exactly in these words, but you get the message that American government is a problem. American government, it's fine to have, quote, big government, big American government with the military, because those defense contractors give big bucks to politicians. But it's not okay to have the American government paying decent wages and holding high standards for police officers. It's not okay for the federal government, or the state governments for that matter, to be, helping fund school districts. So school districts end up having to rely on property taxes. So if you happen to be born in a poor area, guess what? You're going to have crappy schools. And if you happen to be born in a rich area, guess what? You're a member of the Lucky Sperm Club. You're going to have great schools. And those numbers, extend themselves in very, very significant ways. And we have, since the beginning of Reaganism 35 years ago, we have become far more of a caste system in the United States. Before Reagan, regardless of who you were or where you were born, At least if you were white. Now, see, this is the complicating factor because, there's also, race in this equation. But before Reagan, where you were born and how much money your parents had didn't have as much impact as where you will be when you're 30 or 40 years old as it does now. And, if you're born into the bottom quintile now, regardless of race, your probability of going to college is still from single digits into the low tens. Whereas if you're born into a family that's in the top quintile, the top 20%, your probabilities of going to and graduating from college are around 70%. That's a huge difference. And it's all, it's all, the Lucky Sperm Club stuff. And this is no way to run a country. So, I see one of the major impediments to our building a more just republic and ending up with a country where people have a reasonable quality of life, where they describe themselves as happy, where they're not afraid that the next illness or the next job loss is going to literally cause them to end up homeless or dead, where they're not afraid, particularly if their skin is darker than mine, where they're not afraid of every interaction with the police. And frankly, as a white guy, I get nervous in interactions with the police. I mean, everybody does. It's authority figures, authority figures. So what do we do about this? How do we do? Isn't it time for we had the Square Deal, we had the New Deal, we had the Great Society, and then we had Reaganism deconstructing all of it. And nobody has stopped Reaganism yet. In fact, if anything, you could argue that many of the public policies that have been advanced over the last 35 years have moved Reaganism forward. Things have gotten worse. Look at the student debt crisis. Look at police agencies across the country where the standards are just an absolute screaming patchwork quilt. And bad cops who are involved in some cases, behavior for which they're disciplined or even fired, go someplace else and get another job as a police officer. So, the reason that we license doctors and nurses, and the call from the nurse in the last hour was just absolutely brilliant. The reason we license doctors and nurses, principal reason, is because they have the power to kill us. Typically not intentionally, but if they screw up, we're dead. And so we want to know that they're properly trained, properly supervised, and accountable. So they have to have liability insurance, or as it's more commonly referred to, malpractice insurance. They have to have training, and their training has to come from a certified academy. You can't just say, "Hey, I went to school on the internet. Now I'm a doctor." And you've got to go to the appropriate schools, and they have to be licensed. Why don't we do this with the police? And while we're at it, let's pay them better, so that we attract a better caliber of person into our police departments. And then finally, we have to figure out a way to have some sort of an independent review of situations like the Freddie Gray one. And, the courts are a good starting point. But should it be that court? We'll be right back. It's 15 minutes past the hour. I'll take your calls after this.
To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.